The obvious first question is, both of you are tech reporters, long time in tech. How did you come together to write this book? What was it that made the two of you the pair to do this?
Well, so I asked Ryan to write the book with me, and he said no, which was very rude. But I think, when we were first thinking about this was in April of 2022. Elon had just put in the offer. And, Ryan's advice was that Elon says he's going to do a lot of things and then doesn't do them. And so we don't want to be on the hook to write a book about when he said he was going to buy Twitter and then didn't do it. And so we waited. And then in October, the end of October 22, the deal closed. And I think the chaos that ensued surpassed our expectations of how that was going to go. And I got a text from Ryan that said, hey, I got him. And then it was
and of course we knew he would buy it and then influence an election and elect a presidential candidate. We knew that from the get-go. No, it was, in my career I've had a couple opportunities to do books, and I missed those, Peter Thiel reporting or Facebook reporting or what have you. And we got to a point where we were doing 2 or 3 stories a day on Twitter. Sources would call us and be like, this crazy thing happened today. He took away our toilet paper, which actually literally happened at the office. And we were like we can't put, we can only put so many stories in the New York Times. When we have those stories, you get a sentence or two of crazy detail. You can't really expound upon it. And I was thinking, this deserves to be in a longer format. We need to give this justice and serve our sources in a way. And so it just made sense to do something like that. And I'm a reporter that leads. It's hard for me to write without the good reporting, and it felt like we had enough material from the get-go to do a good book.
How did you know when to end it?
That was
We didn't. We had a really clear picture and a really symbiotic picture of what the first 2 parts of the book were going to be. If you've read it, it's divided into 3 parts. And so the first 2 were outlined basically down to a T. We might have moved 1 or 2 chapters around in that as we were writing, but that was really locked from the beginning. And then the 3rd act of the book was just question marks in our outline, in part because it was still happening when we set out to do this. And so we didn't really know what the outcome was going to be. And I think towards the end of the writing, it was
always is this the moment? Is this the moment? And it's our editor would be just wait, there's going to be something, right?
Yeah. And we're trying to find the right ending,
right.
And Musk is someone who does something crazy every day, and so every day we'd wake up and see his Twitter feed and be like, well, maybe this is the end. And we ended up...
challenged Mark Zuckerberg to a cage match. Maybe
right.
That's the end.
It was like him and Mark Zuckerberg beating each other into bloody pulp. But we settled on his meeting in March with Trump.
Spoiler alert.
Sorry,
yeah.
Spoiler. You guys all read it, didn't you? But we really felt like that was the culmination of Musk's political evolution and sort of the power of X as a place for civic discourse kind of colliding. And so that was where we chose to wrap it up. But it was a moving very end.
Yeah, it was this meeting in March of 2024, right? And they meet at in Florida at Nelson Peltz's home, the activist investor. It's their first meeting in a while. It's a breakfast. It's a bunch of other Republican donors, and it was like a perfect moment for us. It's like him coming home in a way, and we know what plays out after. We don't have to explain it to you. We're living it now. Yeah. So you see that, and your mind can fill in the rest. And a lot of folks have asked us, are you going to write another book? Are you going to write another ending? And we may, but right now it feels like perfect, because we don't need to, you don't need to explain it to anyone right now. So,
it's interesting because I referenced this my opening, we didn't know. He was still playing a little bit coy with who he was going to endorse and whether or not he was going to endorse and this sort of thing, and trying to claim that he wasn't right wing and all these sorts of things.
Right.
But now we know that, and so looking back on that,
it's kind of crazy. Yeah, like in our reporting at the Times, which didn't make it into the book, by that point in March, he was already going to endorse the Republican candidate. Mm-hmm. He was talking to donors. It wasn't clear if he was going to make a public endorsement because that came in July, like in the hours after the assassination attempt. But, he was on board. He had a PAC, he's talking about that. And it was just a matter of when he would do it. But yeah, that March meeting was it for us. It was like the perfect moment. So
let's step back a little bit before all that, since I referenced your first crossing swords with Elon. Can you talk a little bit about the story at BuzzFeed? And,
sure. And
was that indeed the first time that you had interacted with him?
So I started at Forbes. At Forbes, I started on this thing called the Wealth Team, which is actually kind of funny. It's group of like kind of cub reporters. It was my first job in a newsroom, like first full-time job. And it's to calculate these like Forbes rich lists, like the Forbes 400, the Forbes billionaires lists, which look like kind of like from the outside, they're just like numbers and like rankings. But as a reporter, you're talking to people about their net worth and like how much is your yacht worth, how much is your wine worth, like is your company private company up this year?
People would bicker with you, right, about the
people
value of their
yeah.
their wine collection.
Exactly.
Try to like rise in the billionaires list.
And so I was basically,
I'm not making this
up. There are names, I won't name them, but like, I bickered with someone over their 40,000 bottle Burgundy collection and what it should be valued at and what their super yacht was worth on it. But I was always based here and reporting on tech folks that did that, and some people didn't talk, other people's talked like immediately and like they wanted to be up every year. Elon was in that group, although I didn't handle him. Like another reporter did. He talked a lot about his net worth. He was highly leveraged, which is kind of funny because that's how he got so rich. He was able to kind of take debt from his other companies, plow that into a new company, and so on and so forth. So I'd been familiar with him, hadn't really interacted with him until I got to BuzzFeed. And at BuzzFeed, I took more of a corporate accountability role. And we started looking at Tesla in 2018, which had these issues around the Model 3, the production. He was, everyone knows the myth of him sleeping in the factory and he's like working these long hours and that kind of thing. He works his way out of it, this crisis. It's also the period where he said he had funding secured to take the company private. And he also gets involved in this incident in Thailand with these kids trapped in a cave. If everyone remembers that. These kids get trapped in a cave. The water rises, they can't get out. It's like an international story. And he decides, I'm gonna get involved, despite all my other problems, I'm gonna get involved and build a submarine to get these kids out of the cave. Fast forward, the submarine doesn't get used, these kids get saved, and one of the rescuers in that incident goes on TV and says that the submarine was a waste of time, Elon Musk can shove it up his ass, basically, and he was a complete distraction. And Elon gets mad, he sees it, and tweets out the guy is a pedophile. And so as a reporter, as any intrepid reporter would do, you email Elon Musk and you ask, why did you call that guy a pedophile? And he sends me back this very long screed explaining why this guy was a child rapist who had taken a 12-year-old bride. Just insane stuff. And I had very little interaction with him at that point, but we ended up publishing that email in full to show his state of mind, to show that he, wasn't thinking straight, essentially.
Sort of conspiratorial thinking about his critics.
Exactly. Kind of this, we see that play out now, but in some ways he was always that way. And he gets very mad at me. He deposes me for that reporting.
Well, he tried to.
Tried to depose me. He sent someone to our office to serve me with papers. And yeah, the rest is history. So we have a long history. He blocked me on Twitter at one point after that. He suspended my account on Twitter after he took over. So, yeah, that's he really likes me. Yeah.
Did he let you back on Twitter?
Yeah,
He let me back on Twitter. I'm back. Yeah.
Well, he verified Ryan actually again I think it's sort of as a troll.
So when he took away the blue check marks from people, he gave mine back as a when he like.
Yeah.
He gave it back to a couple people who were like, oh, I don't need a check mark. Paying for check marks is stupid.
Yeah.
And so
To make people think that you pay for your check mark.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like 5th grade stuff.
Yeah. So, Kate, when did you start following Twitter? And it's interesting when I look at your bio on the New York Times website, it says that you're the Twitter Elon Musk reporter. I imagine when you were hired at the New York Times, that wasn't a beat.
No,
But it is now.
wasn't a beat. So when I was hired at the Times, I was covering Google, and the Times already had a Google reporter. So when I came in, I had sort of a mashup of companies that no one, the Times thinks of as like. So that was Twitter, Snapchat, and the entire gig economy. All the small ones. So I had a lot going on, and then after the pandemic, I went to my editor and I was like, I kind of want to pull back. Like, so much going on with gig economy stuff, and there's so much going on with social media, and I feel like I can't do both well, and I want to just do one. And so they said, okay, fine. At that point, I went kind of exclusively to Twitter. And that would have been January of 2022 was when I officially resigned the gig economy. And then in April of 2022 was when Elon Musk made the offer. So I'm extremely glad I didn't have to cover Uber during the acquisition. But, I really always felt like Twitter just had a fundamental set of issues that were really fascinating. I mean, the issues of speech online, censorship, and just the role of like a public political conversation were really fascinating to me. And I felt like there was just more to mine there. And so I was really excited about like digging more deeply into that particular story.
So on Twitter before Musk, and one of the things that you talk about a little bit in the book, there's this sort of perception that Twitter was a failing company, or it was a poor company. Now, let's put it in context. Twitter had almost $5 billion in revenue. It was 17 years old at the time, 18 years old, if you count from the very beginning. If I had a company that had $5 billion in revenue after 18 years, I'd feel pretty good about it.
I mean, that's the crazy thing about Twitter is like Twitter actually right up before the acquisition was doing quite well. It was profitable
right,
for the first time, and its share price was doing the best it's ever done.
Thank you, Elliot.
Well, thank you, Elliot.
Yeah.
And so, it was in a relatively good place, but it was also a company that, it's always like the comps are always Facebook. And Twitter is not Facebook. It never will be Facebook. It is never going to be at that scale. And investors wanted it to be. And so the constant drumbeat was, why aren't you Facebook? Why aren't you Snapchat, for that matter? I mean, I tell people all the time that Snapchat is a bigger company than Twitter, and they're shocked. They don't believe me. But it has a bigger user base. It has a bigger revenue. And we just don't pay as much attention to it. So, Twitter really punched above its weight in a lot of ways. But also had a lot of mismanagement going on, a lot of neglect from Jack Dorsey, who just had kind of decided to check out and not run the company anymore. And there were a lot of those issues percolating that I think set the company up in the position to be acquired. And that was a story that Ryan and I really wanted to tell and sort of correct the record, because I think when Musk came in, there was like this narrative flattening that happened. And the story was, evil Elon versus these white knights at Twitter. And there was really so much that Jack had done that had put Twitter on the course to be acquired by Musk. So much mismanagement that had gone on. And so we wanted to tell that story and be really transparent about the fact that this was not some perfect angelic company that came and got crushed by this evil billionaire.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, the 2 years from like literally the start of the pandemic, where in January of 2020, I believe, there was the activist investor that comes in, Elliot, and all the employees start this hashtag campaign to hashtag We Back Jack Dorsey. He can do no wrong. We want him as our leader. Like, screw you, Wall Street. Like, stay away from our company. We got this. To when Elon buys the company, Jack is completely checked out. Like, he is like, we have a scene of him on January 6th, the day of the insurrection, and he is on an island in French Polynesia, where Kim Kardashian had her 40th birthday party.
Her 40th birthday at a resort called the Brando, after Marlon Brando,
so
because he had vacation there.
Dorsey saw that and wanted to go there, and so
Yeah.
he's running the company from French Polynesia. And you're like, dude, these people like backed you. Like, your employees like really wanted you there, supporting them and like encouraging them. They went through the pandemic, and he is completely gone. Like, he is, you know, he would call in to meetings at the company virtually. Everyone was on Zoom, obviously, and he would be in a sauna, like with infrared light back behind him, or the Wi-Fi would be so bad so his video would cut out.
Or like, we would hear stories about people could hear roosters often in the background of his Zoom calls because he was like,
because he was on a surf retreat or something.
A beach somewhere. Yeah.
This was in his ZZ Top phase.
I think he's been in the ZZ Top phase, but yeah, this was the infrared light, no seed oil, 1 meal a day, saltwater phase.
Yeah.
Which is, there's many phases of Jack Dorsey. So yeah.
But setting it up to be sold, I mean, what he did was, in essence, weaken it to the point where, when someone like Musk came along, Musk's offer was a very good offer.
Yes, and Dorsey was enamored with Musk. Let's not forget, he idolized Musk in some ways. Like, right before the pandemic happened, Twitter had this big event in Houston called One Team. Everyone flies in to celebrate the company. It's kind of like an offsite, and the keynote speaker at that is Elon Musk. And there's a lot of parallels between Jack and Elon. You know, Jack was running two companies, in Square and Twitter, but Elon was the guy that could run, you know, Tesla and SpaceX, Neuralink, Boring Company, and he saw that as like as an example, you know. And I don't think we put this in the book, but we heard stories of Jack being at Square and saying, like, you know, I'm working on a payments company. It's like a dongle for payments, and this guy's like putting rockets into space and landing them. Like, what the fuck am I doing, you know? And so it was always aspirational for him. So when Elon comes in to buy the company and take away the one thing in life that Jack cared about the most, he was open to it. And he let it happen.
When I think about, so there's Twitter, which is sort of before Elon Musk bought it, and then there's X, and there's X before the election, BE, and X after the election, which I would say is AT for after Trump, right? It's two different things. And the book, and obviously the title of the book is, you know, he destroyed Twitter, right? That was clearly the assessment, big financial loss, you know, big reputational loss because of the chaos and everything else. This thing's gonna blow up any day now, and we've thought that for a long time, and it still hasn't. Do you think that that's still accurate? Or, I mean, you alluded a little bit to he influenced an election. I mean, did he influence an election?
Yeah, well, I think that the platform that we knew as Twitter is gone. You know, it's X now, it's a different thing. I think the existence of that platform as a central hub for civic discourse no longer exists. It is now, you know, the briefing room of the party. And that is a valuable tool, certainly, but it's not the same tool that it was. I think we see that very clearly, and I think Elon sees that very clearly. You know, he has transformed it into a platform that is about him and his voice and his agenda. He sort of made himself the main character of X, and he is in that role all day, every day. And that's a success to him, but it's a destruction as well of the service that it once was. So I think those two things can coexist, right? It can be a success for the goals that he wanted and the things that he wanted to achieve, and a destruction of the platform that served a broader conversation, and certainly a tremendous destruction of value. I mean, I think it was like reported to be one of the worst deals since the economic crisis in 2008.
For debt holders, yeah.
Yeah. And Fidelity actually recently marked it back up.
Fidelity marked it down to $9 billion.
It was down to $9 billion, and now they put it back up to 12. I think. So for something that you spend $44 billion on to be $12 billion, I mean, I'm not in investing. I don't think that's a win. You tell me.
Yeah, you're the investor, right? Is that good?
Clearly
44
not.
to 9.
Well, sometimes you make investments in one thing to help something else, and I mean, I don't think that Elon Musk was a master genius and said, I'm going to buy the presidency and that's going to help all my other business interests. But, that's essentially what's happened.
So, but that's a little bit ahistorical in a way, because at the time he bought Twitter, he actually hated Donald Trump, which, he's kind of lucked himself into this position, which is kind of his magic and like his success story as an entrepreneur in some ways. But, he was a supporter of Ron DeSantis. He was leaning Republican. He supported Ron DeSantis. He had that ill-fated Twitter space with Ron DeSantis where he announced the presidency and it went completely kaput. But at the time, he was telling Donald Trump to sail into the sunset. And Donald Trump was calling him a con man and a bullshit artist and someone who would come to the Oval Office and would get on his knees and beg him if he wanted to. And it's like these guys hated each other, and they found this kind of marriage of convenience in the summer before the election, and the rest is kind of history. So.
Yeah, I mean, luck plays a huge role in whenever you have success at that level, luck was a part of it. And there are those that think it was all because of my sweat and hard work and my genius, but those are not usually the self-aware ones.
And there's a ton of luck beyond that too, which is if you doing like a plus minus kind of analysis of this deal, yes, he lost a lot of money on the Twitter deal, but he just raised at XAI at what valuation? 50 billion?
I think 50, yeah.
And he took the data from X to build up XAI, spun up a whole new company in a year, and people are investing in it at this crazy valuation. And so if you're Sequoia or if you're Andreessen Horowitz, yes, you lost money on the Twitter deal, but you, on paper, made a lot of money on XAI. And now you're a bit closer to him, where if he's raising money at SpaceX or Neuralink or Boring Company, you're now at the front of the line.
Did the Twitter, because you mentioned this earlier and it's worth following up on, did the Twitter investors get a piece of XAI? Because there was some reporting at the time that it was all Musk.
It's really unclear.
Yeah. He publicly promised that investors in the X deal would get, I think, a 20 or 25% cut on the XAI deal. I have tried to follow that up, and it's very unclear how that's being handled. But, he's said it. I'm sure someone will sue him over it at some point.
Or not, because
or not.
Right.
But yeah, that's supposedly the plan.
The other thing that I find very interesting was regulation and what and he's famously sort of bulldozes over anything, doesn't care. They'll come back and we'll slash fast, fix later. It's similar with dealing with regulation. Thinking about regulation in the context of before the election and after the election, can you talk a little bit about what happened before the election that sort of snapped him back into, snapped him into being honest again, effectively, and would that happen again?
Sure. So, among all of his companies, he's under, I think, around 22 federal investigations.
That we know of.
Yeah.
Yeah, that we know of.
So that's more than most.
More than me.
More than.
Are you sure? Yeah.
I hope.
It's interesting when you sign a lot of. So we fill out forms that we file with the SEC and all this kind of stuff. And one of the questions is always, sit on public boards. Are you being investigated by anybody? No. I couldn't imagine saying 22.
Well, it's a yes or no question, so it's just yes, right?
You betcha.
You're not
it's an exclamation mark.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just a heavy circle around yes. So there are a significant number of federal investigations into his businesses. One of the most aggressive of those has been from the FTC, and I think it's been very, very clear from the get-go that the Trump administration would like to replace Lena Khan, and that will get rid of one of the most persistent investigations that Elon Musk is facing. The other one that he's dealing with that has been particularly aggressive is from the SEC, looking into his purchases of Twitter shares prior to disclosing them. I think the threshold is 5% when you are buying up shares in a public company. So take notes, all of you who are just trying to accumulate an ownership stake in public companies.
Unless you have $200 billion. And you just
But 5%, you have to tell someone.
Yeah.
So he went to 9%. The SEC is upset. And they have been trying to get him to sit for a deposition in that case since it happened. So that was 2022. We're now almost in 2025. He has been evading his deposition the entire time. And they recently tried to sanction him for that, and the court said no. So,
why did the court say no?
The court, very interestingly, so what the SEC did is they said they wanted to sanction Musk for the travel expenses of the SEC lawyers who flew out to depose him, and then he flaked. And the court, very interestingly, said that the court itself would pay their travel expenses rather than sanctioning Musk for them. So your tax dollars at work, I guess. But so that's another investigation that has been very persistent for Musk that very well could disappear under a Trump administration that says, hey, stop looking into my top donor.
What about things like what happened in Brazil?
What about them?
Well, basically they kicked him out of the country, right? And he said, over my dead body, and then he caved.
Yeah, so the Brazil instance is very interesting. And what we've reported on is that Musk has been very inconsistent with complying with censorship requests. So the Modi government, for example, has asked Twitter to censor a BBC documentary that's critical of the government in India, and Twitter has done that. So, in the world of free speech, the BBC is off limits. At the same time, Brazil has asked for X to take down content that involves election denialism and questions the outcome of the election. Musk said, no, we're going to leave that alone. And then it got to the point where X was banned from Brazil. They were banned for not quite a month and then caved and agreed to remove those posts, remove those accounts, come back into the country. And he's not said anything about it since then, even though this was for a while his big crusade. He was posting all day, every day about how corrupt the Brazilian judiciary is for trying to force this censorship. He even created a whole separate account on X that was targeting the judge in that case and releasing damning information about the judge, and that's kind of gone dormant. So he sort of moved on from that fight, and now X is back in Brazil. But he tends to sort of pick these fights and get really worked up about them, comment on them a lot, and then in the situations where he backs off, you don't really hear about it.
I think what we realize is he makes decisions based on his political alliances.
Yeah.
So in Brazil, for example, the judge Moraes is aligned with the current president, who is an opponent of Bolsonaro. And Bolsonaro is very close with Musk. They did a bunch of events together with bringing Starlink to the Amazon, and they built a friendship there. So naturally, Musk is going to be opposed to anyone who favors Lula. In India, though, Musk is quite friendly with Modi. He wants to bring Tesla into the country and sell cars there, which have been restricted. And so he's going to play ball with the Modi government. We've seen that also in Turkey, for example, where he's kind of built up this friendship with Erdogan, complied with censorship requests there. And so what we've learned is that it's not such a principled decision-making process when it comes to free speech or not free speech or upholding whatever. It comes down to what his interests are and what he's feeling on a given day. So
it seems that he likes autocrats.
You said it, not me. Yeah. I mean, Milei,
Yeah.
Meloni in Italy, Orban in Hungary. He's going after the Labour Party in the UK now. But yeah, so.
What I wonder with respect to the Brazil situation is, in his new position as whatever the special whatever to the president, best buddies or whatever we're calling them
First
now.
buddy.
First buddies,
Yeah,
sorry.
the
First
buddy.
buddy to the president. Does he end up, something like Brazil happens again, and he doesn't want to do it? Does he try and leverage, that relationship to make it go away?
Sure. I mean, I think that there's so many opportunities in this political alliance for all of his businesses, not just X. There's the potential to lobby the Trump administration for EV credits, which is not something that, Trump has been particularly interested in the past. There is the potential for new contracts for SpaceX. I mean, there's like so many business opportunities, and I think that investors are expecting that. We've seen Tesla stock rise a lot after the election because I think investors are betting on the fact that Musk will be able to use his relationship with Trump to benefit his companies.
Are we talking like a global impact level or like?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously everything that you talked about is U.S. budgetary, but sure, globally.
I mean, he's already on calls with Zelensky. Trump's first call with Ukraine. Elon is has the other receiver up to his ear. He's on calls with Erdogan. I mean, it's going to be very interesting when it comes to China, for example, where Elon has an incredible vested interest in the factories there and people buying his cars. He plays very friendly with Xi. And Trump has signaled this kind of very aggressive approach to China, of course, with tariffs. So that for me is kind of going to be the kind of barometer in a way of where he draws a line between his personal interest versus what is best for the country or for MAGA or for the Donald Trump party. But yeah, we're kind of in an unprecedented territory. Yeah.
So talking about the chaos that happened at Twitter and the slash fast, what was it, slash fast fix later? Is that the
I think
term?
it's just slash fast.
Yeah, slash
fixing,
fast. As I mentioned earlier, I've read it before the election. I imagine people who read it after the election were thinking, this is what we have in store for us. I had tried to put a lot of that out of my mind, but do we have, is he actually going to be able to pull that off, or is he even going to try to pull that off?
I think it's a model, right? It's certainly a model where he comes into something with very little expertise and thinks he is the master cutter. I mean, Donald Trump called him that basically on a Twitter space or X space or whatever. And he's the master cost saver basically, and he thinks of that in his mind. And so when he came into Twitter, he had this goal of eliminating $1 billion in costs across employment and other cost savings. And what did that mean for him? Well, that meant not paying rent. It meant cutting janitorial services. It meant cutting food, cutting health benefits.
Pushing for attrition through a return to office mandate. I mean, all these things that you now see him proposing for Doge. He's proposing
Department of Government Efficiency.
He's proposing a mandatory return to office mandate for government employees that will lead to voluntary resignations. He's talking about the real estate footprint of the federal government and how they could reduce buildings, talking about the utilities being spent to power these buildings that are unoccupied. So it's really the same thinking and the same strategic moves that went into cost cutting at Twitter that he's now trying to take and apply to the federal government. And it's so interesting because there's now all these senators kind of trying to pull his ear and say, hey, wait, we have some cost cutting plans that are strategic and aren't just stopping paying rent on federal buildings. But he wants to take the Twitter playbook and apply it to the federal government.
So if you think of the scale, it's $1 billion at Twitter, it's $2 trillion in the federal government. There's going to be some pain there. And his view on pain is that, he said this publicly, is, we're going to endure some pain for long-term growth, right? If you bear with it in the short term, we will all prosper in the long term. And he's also said things like, if it hurts so much, I can just put it back. If I cut Social Security, I'll just put it back. You'll have it. You'll have it. And that was his view on certain things at Twitter. For example, he fired folks who had no idea what their jobs were, and the platform was just screwed for a while. And he's like, okay, shit, we need to hire these people back. Let's bring them back. And he did. And that's kind of his view on it. We'll cut until it's so painful so unbearable, and maybe we'll just bring some of this back and fix it and undo it. Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how that works. Talking about him slashing at Twitter, one of the things that happened, obviously from the very beginning, there was, it's going to fail, it's going to fail, it's going to go offline. And then before you know it, he's laid off 80% of the workforce, and Twitter's still running. And there's lots of parts of Twitter that aren't running as well, and this sort of thing. But in general, the site's still up and it's still alive. Since that time, we've been going through for the last couple of years what I refer to as kind of a white-collar tech jobs recession. The economy's great. The economy's great. Unemployment's at record lows. Tech unemployment, white-collar tech unemployment is not great. There's a lot of people that have been struggling to find jobs and look for a long time. And it feels like some of that was he first started slashing, and then Facebook, revenue's going up, but they're cutting employees. Google, revenue's going up, but they're cutting employees. They realized that they got a little bit too heady during the pandemic and everything else, and they could do a lot more with less. Do you think he's given a permission structure to all those companies to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's absolutely true. And you've seen people in the Valley talk about this, that they feel like they kind of get a umbrella of protection from him making a crazy decision, and then they can kind of like scoot
Less
in
crazy.
underneath and do a little bit less crazy of a reduction, and it makes sense. But this isn't an idea, right? And I think that Twitter had been mismanaged previously, and it was at where Twitter was planning to announce a 25% workforce reduction during their earnings report in April, and Musk's offer preempted that, and so they never did it. But this was a company that knew it needed cuts, that knew it had overgrown during the COVID years. He benefited, right? I mean, if you remember, like early COVID, everyone was glued to Twitter, and that was where we were learning all this stuff in real time about the virus. And they overcompensated off of that, and I think the company was well aware of that. I think he gets a little credit for the cost cutting because it happened under him, but I think it was a widely acknowledged thing at Twitter at the time of like, we need to reduce headcount, and a widely acknowledged thing I think throughout the Valley, because so many of these tech companies really benefited from the stay-at-home era, and everyone suddenly needing to be on Zoom all the time and needing to be on Twitter for 12 hours a day to like get information.
I need to be on Twitter for 12 hours a day.
You don't.
Yeah.
You really don't.
So are you still on Twitter?
Yeah.
We are, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm tweeting far less. I've moved over to Blue Sky and Threads and everything, but
How many people in the audience used to be sort of pre-Musk big Twitter users? I mean, so not a ton. How many of you are no longer Twitter users? Because so. No, not never was. I want to know how many people were big users and weren't.
in terms of users, though, I'm curious. Have you deleted your accounts or just stopped checking? Deleted account. Okay, stop. Okay.
I still have my account, but I stopped checking, and I think I deleted the password, and so maybe I could get back on it at some point.
I mean, it's kind of the and we talk about the subtitle of the book, How Elon Musk Destroyed Twitter. His legacy is taking this watering hole and shattering it and scattering people to Threads or Blue Sky or Mastodon. Like we used to all go check Twitter every morning, right? And I don't do that anymore.
I think that one of the really clear indicators to me that Twitter is in a decline state is that Mark Zuckerberg feels comfortable ripping it off. Like, he's always been envious of Twitter. He's talked about it as the clown car that fell into the gold mine. Obviously attracted to what they were doing and is interested in the product, but didn't think he could challenge that space until Musk came along. And as soon as Musk bought the company, suddenly we have Threads. But like, the idea of Twitter, of a text-based social media, was not new. It wasn't like Snapchat had just debuted stories and he was like, oh great, like let's put this in Instagram. He saw a moment where Twitter was weak enough that he could siphon that user base. And I think that, if you want to know where a company is weak, it's like when Mark Zuckerberg decides to copy them.
Is that the Kate Conger thesis?
That's my thesis.
Wow. I'm investing in that. Yeah.
So you finished the first book in the Elon Musk, trilogy or 4-book series.
This is the
or
Hunger
5.
Games trilogy. This is the first book of the Hunger Games. Yeah.
Where does the second book in the series end?
Well, we're really planning it like a Harry Potter saga. We're going to do 7.
Elon Musk in the Chamber of Secrets. Yeah.
No, I don't know. I mean, we might do like an expanded epilogue or something, but I don't know if we'll do another full book.
Yeah.
We got to see where it goes.
Yeah.
So the day that he leaves the administration is the end of your second book. So,
Maybe,
there you go.
The Doge book.
The Doge book. So thank you both very much. Fantastic book.
Thank you.